was Tarantino, the only film he did at that time would have been Reservoir
Yeah,
Dogs,
actually,
right?
yeah. When I met him, it was like the first night of the festival, and and remarkably, he loved Angela Jones' performance in Curdled. She was the main character, obviously, Gabriella. And he told me there over the next few days we ran into each other and talked a little bit more that he was going to write a role for her in the film that he was writing at the time, which was Pulp Fiction.
Welcome to Divine Podcast. I am your host, Eric Yacklin.
And I'm your second host, the better of the two, Rick Sikowski.
You are a better host. I'll give
I
you
don't
that.
know that that's true.
Whew.
I'm wearing Miami today.
Ooh,
why am I wearing Miami today?
Look at this. You want to know why? You want to know why?
Why you're wearing that?
You want to know who the number one team in baseball is right now?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Detroit Tigers are killing it so far this season.
Are they going to win the World Series?
No, of course not. Why are you wearing Miami? I cut you off. Why are you wearing Miami today?
Why do you think? Who do we have on today?
Oh, got it. With the Dolphin Whisperer.
Yeah,
that's who we have on. He's always posted videos. Yeah, we got our good friend John Maass, who has played an integral part in both of our lives in a couple different scenarios, which I think will be fun to explore today.
Yeah, it's so the real quick backstory is John was my film professor back in college. He wrote a movie that Quentin Tarantino produced called Curdled. We're going to get into that quite a bit because they're re-releasing it on Blu-ray. So we're going to talk about that whole experience. But also, he was the chairman of the film department, and he hired you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, film and audio. So it was hired in on the audio side because they were just starting. Yeah, we'll get into it when John's on. About it.
He is one of the funniest people. I don't know if he'll be funny.
Right?
He'll be funny. He'll be funny, but like, God, he's so quick at coming up with things. Yeah. And his humor is great.
The mentality, it's all very intellectual humor. He
is one of the smartest guys. Like he's a lawyer. He went to law school. Like I said, he did the film with Tarantino. Then he was the chairman of the film department. Now I think he's writing stuff now. He's constantly writing. So there's a bunch of that.
Yeah, I want to get into I know you want to dive heavy into Curdled because that's obviously a very monumental thing. I don't know if he's coming prepared with defining moments. I don't know if that is one for him or if he's got something to talk. If he's got something to talk about, you'd think
he's been over. He lives in Miami, but he's been to Texas 20 times, like to hang out and stuff. And you and I have hung out with him in Texas, and I don't know if he's ever listened to the podcast. He's like a good friend, and I don't know.
I think I'm pretty sure he listened to the Firecracker episode because I asked him about it, and I asked him like if I did it justice, and he like very honestly was like, well, your version of the car was better because it was more it was unfiltered, right? I was
so that was the thing. This is why I said when you tell the Firecracker story that we need someone who doesn't know the story, right? Because John didn't know the story when we were traveling to, was that Steve's premiere? Yeah. So we went to Steve's premiere, and so it was like an hour and a half drive. Simple Man on Netflix. So when we were going to the premiere of that, it was me, you, and him in the car, and we had an hour and a half, and you told the story, and it took like almost an hour and a half to tell the story.
I told it in its entirety.
For a writer and who's as comedic as he is, I mean, he savored. I'm gonna have to cut all that out. Savored every. See, the problem is I'm not now. Like, because
it doesn't matter. No, yeah, you shouldn't.
People are gonna be like, "Oh, this guy can't
talk."
But
you got there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, he savored every word. Like he dove into all the things that and this is why I wanted to have him on to tell the story.
Yeah,
with having you tell the story, but we ended up doing it in the car. And and that goes back to kind of how we started the episode is we can't be our authentic selves.
Correct. You know what's funny about that? I was thinking about that this morning with the authenticity. I think that's probably the first time John ever saw you and I actually interacting authentically as well.
Right.
I think that was probably a very eye-opening drive for him. And I made him sit in the back.
Yeah,
I called shotgun.
That's true. You're such an asshole. But it's one of the. It's funny because it's not that we're inauthentic, right? Like it's what it is. You and I have known each other 30 something years, 40 years, however long. Yeah, like close to 40 years. Yeah. So like we kind of like, even though we've changed through the years and we've become adults and professionals, we still every now and then slip back into high school mode. And
more than now and then. But
well, every day at text.
But yeah, your point's valid, because if we're around, our wives or our kids or our whatever, we're not able to be as, I don't know.
Silly. We'll say the word
silly. I like that. Exactly.
Yeah. It looks like Mr. Maass is
ebb and flow. Here we go.
Welcome, John Maass.
It's good to be here, Rick.
Is it?
Hi, John.
You seemed very belabored in saying that.
I just want to make sure that there was no echo or static or anything like that.
All right, but pulling back the curtains, we just spent the past 20 minutes making sure that there was no echo or static.
So no, I'm really happy that you guys asked me to be on the show, and I love talking to you guys, whether thousands of other people are listening in or not. Especially when you guys tell me your childhood stories, tales of woe.
Exactly. So we touched on this. John, I actually wanted to get your take on this, because I think that car ride, Rick and I mentioned it I think it was in the intro, that I would probably make it in there.
And correct us, John, that was going to the Steve premiere in San Antonio, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So my question to you, John, is I feel like that may have been a very eye-opening experience for two reasons. One, because you've probably never seen that particular side of me, but also you'd probably never seen Rick and I interact in that way, which is probably a very authentic way. So I'm curious what your mentality was coming out of that car ride,
and how much did it damage us? Friendship.
The story that Eric told was just gripping, fascinating, and it was actually such a revelation of our abilities over all these years, and I understand him much better now of the M80, or it wasn't an M80, it was like a military level.
It was homemade. It was homemade. So episode 19 of season 1 of the Firecracker, for anybody that'd like to go back and watch and learn about what John's referencing right now.
And then there was the postscript to that, which involved hijinks in your neighborhood and Rick out the window.
Yeah. We never told that side of it. Correct,
I would not address that. That epilogue. But as far as your story, Eric, it was one of the best stories I've ever heard in my life, and it lasted an hour.
It was an hour long. I'm sorry for that.
No, you're a very gifted storyteller. And you had authority, because you were telling about something that you know better than anybody, except for perhaps the clerk of the courts in the county.
Yeah, exactly. The what's the person who presses the buttons and records that? What are they called again? The
court reporter.
Yeah, the court reporter. Yeah, except for the court reporter. What's really interesting about that, we don't have to spend a lot of time in this, is that retelling was actually the thing that prompted putting it onto the podcast, because I had not told that story in a very long time. And while we were going through it ended up taking an hour, because I was sort of mentally refreshing and kind of jumping around and, to the different pieces and parts. But that was the genesis of, we should figure out a way to tell this and actually put it on the podcast. So,
all right, let's rewind. A young pup back in 1997. goes to a small film school in Miami. It's a side.
Oh, there.
Yeah,
That's,
there it is.
yeah.
Or that for you, John. And because of all the videos you post of you swimming with dolphins. But so I go to this film school, and you always kind of, looking back, you always kind of wonder, did I make the right decision? Because if I went to NYU, you have this experience. If you go to USC, you go to this experience. You went to FSU, which when I was in college was the best film school. So you kind of always wonder. But what made it probably the best experience I could have ever had was people like you who were in the industry doing it while you were teaching. So at that point, let's just jump in. Like you did Curdled with Tarantino, but let's start from the beginning when you did it as a student film. So take it away, and then we'll jump in with a million questions.
Well, just before I went to FSU film school with the master's program, is that I was part of the very first class and started in 1989, just so people know how long ago it was. And as everyone in the country knows, Florida State University is in Tallahassee, Florida, which is way out, almost in Georgia. They've decided to put the master's film program in a city called Sarasota, south of Tampa, because there was the school's master in theater program was there, and they thought that the film students and masters in the theater program could collaborate, which is exactly what happened. It was fantastic. But before that, I was a lawyer for a few years, and I was a lawyer for a few years in Miami. And I'd always wanted to get into film. I didn't know how to do it. I thought it was impossible. I made a little film in college. It was a great experience, but I still didn't think it was possible. And then I volunteered for Miami Film Festival, just driving people around and all that. And I realized that a lot of the filmmakers were just like regular people. I always thought they were kind of in this rarefied world, and decided to, that inspired me to apply to film school. So it was an amazing experience. Not everybody needs to go to film school, as we all know. A lot of great filmmakers never set foot in a film school. You're one of the exceptions. You're one of the exceptions. Right?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I guess you could say Spielberg, but I don't know. I still think film school's needed.
I think it's a great asset, and for me, as for a lot of people, it was getting to know people who were better than me at everything, and collaborating with them and becoming friends with them. And this is one of the things I really love about film school. You get to play roles on other people's projects for instance, you can have a position that's not your specialty or that you're not really good at, and maybe AD somebody's film or boom somebody's film, and see how they work, see how they direct, and it's a great experience. That has a great deal to do with how much you get out of film school, just participating in your classmates' films.
Well, I'll just jump in a little bit based on what Rick said, right? So is it a requirement in order to be able to make a film? It is not. Do you gain a level of knowledge and information and exposure to things that
and contacts,
all that would take a lot longer if you didn't? Yes, there's no question.
Etiquette. There's a whole thing that like when you could tell people when we work with people who've never been to a film school, you can always tell that they don't have the set etiquette that other people do.
And also, and to take another step further, and this is no longer an issue, but back, in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, we were still shooting on film, and that, even though that was, there were digital options even into that period, it enhances your sense of protocol and the preciousness of every shot, and because it's expensive, and you don't have unlimited film stock. So that was one of the things that I think was really cool about our program. Obviously FSU was way before that, but at NYU we still shot on film pretty deep into the digital age. There were options, but one or the other. But anyway, FSU was great. Getting back to the environment there. It was also an artistic. Sarasota is an art town. There are a lot of theaters, community theaters, a lot of visual artists. There's a school across the street called New College that used to be a kind of hippie professor. The professors were all kind of like from the 60s, at least mentally. And the students were all very liberal and creative. So that was part of our environment. But most important, we worked with the actors on our exercises and then on our class projects and ultimately our thesis films. And in my case, in the case of Reb Braddock, who's my writing partner on the feature version of Curdled, and then directed our thesis film version of the story Curdled, which we were going to talk about. That collaboration was fantastic. All the students were really had different levels of experience in filmmaking. Some none, like me, or virtually none. But he had a vast experience before he started the master's program. And at any rate, it was just great working with all these talented people. And then as far as the actors go, Angela Jones was in the acting program, and she acted in some of our shorts and the thesis version of Curdled, and ultimately the feature version of it. And she was great.
And just to kind of sidestep there, she was also in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Which
we'll get to how that's the character she plays in Pulp Fiction, but we'll get there in a second. Let me ask you this: so the kind of synopsis of Curdled, why don't you tell that, because it's so original for back when you wrote it. Now there's been a million stories like that, but why don't you give the synopsis from the short film and then what it becomes in the feature?
Well, the story is about a young woman named Gabriella, who is from Colombia. She's immigrated to the U.S. and she's been fascinated with horror and violence, like a lot of us are. But in her case, it's very extreme. She reads voraciously about murders and keeps a scrapbook about violent crime cases. And she finds out about a company that specializes in cleaning up violent crime scenes, gets a job there. And that's sort of the premise, and ultimately has a confrontation, an encounter with a serial killer, and she kills him. But
oh, spoilers!
Spoilers.
That's not the end of the film, though. No. So that's it. But the way it happened, I think this is something that I really think is kind of was cool and very lucky. We were driving to lunch one day to a restaurant near campus, and one of my classmates who's from Sarasota brought up, I don't know why he said it, oh, that building there, that condominium complex is for elderly people, and a friend of mine works for a company that goes in and removes the decomposing bodies of people who die alone, and that's his job. And he just said it casually. I thought, that's an incredible, horrible job. And I just started thinking about it, and then I thought that might be a great premise for a film. It wasn't about violent crimes; it was about people who died alone. And then a few days later, I saw a 2020 type show about a woman who'd been murdered in her apartment, and her friend was talking about how she had to go in and clean up the.
Oh wow!
And so I kind of blended those two together, and that's where the idea came from.
Wow!
You want to hear something funny? Not too long ago, I would say within the past 2 years, Ted, my brother, got a job going in taking out decomposing bodies. He never went though. He got the job and stuff, and he had to go through training. I think. Ted, fill in the comments if I'm getting this wrong. But I was on the phone with him, and be like, "What are you doing? You're not built for this.
No.
Like, there's no way you're doing it." And so he never ended up going
to do that. I mean, you have to have an exceptional constitution in terms of removing yourself from horror.
Yeah,
I've got a friend who often goes out with someone that is their job to pick up body parts after accidents on the expressway. God. And so when there's like massive accidents, and then and my buddy goes out with that guy on a fairly regular basis to
is there good money in that?
Like,
why else would you do it other than if you're trying to write a feature film?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, no, that's amazing. It's a horrible job. And when I was researching the short script for the short script, I called several cleaning company managers or owners and asked them if they'd ever done it. And a few of them had actually done it, but I couldn't find a company that specialized in it. Within a few years after the feature came out, or even before the feature, maybe between the short and the feature, companies that specialized in violent crime scenes started um, to open their doors, so to speak, and then we've heard more and more about them in other films focused on the subject. But well, I met a guy in Miami one time who had a company that did that, maybe 10 years after the film came out. And he said that one of the things, and of course our film was totally unrealistic. I mean, they didn't really have hazmat type suits on, and when they went into the houses, but not even masks. But it was more cinematic, not to have all that gear.
Of course, yeah.
So anyway, so he said that a lot of what they did was like contracting. They actually had to go in and replace floors and drywall. And anyway, it's pretty gruesome and horrible as a line of work. But that's the premise. And what happened after that was, well, I wrote a very short version of it, 5 pages, made a short film with Angela Jones playing the main character, Angela Jones, who ultimately was in Pulp Fiction. Then we were selected as one of the thesis films, which were 15 to 30-minute films. Reb Braddock was chosen to direct. I produced and wrote it. Our friend Dave Parrish DP'd it, and our other friend Cielo Arango was the editor. They were all amazing, obviously, and the film did pretty well. I mean, at the screening, the thesis screening, and then we tried to get it into festivals around the world with the view to finding someone who might help us make it into a feature. We were writing a feature version of it.
How long was the short?
The short was a half an hour, which is not really a short. It's too long, but it was 30 minutes. And so we went, the short went to festivals in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Tokyo. I didn't go to the Tokyo festival. Reb went. A festival in Bavaria, which was fantastic. And then it got into a festival in Italy in a city called Viareggio on the Tuscany coast. It was this amazing place. And that's where I met Quentin. He came to our screening, really liked it, came up to me afterwards and basically said, if you're not already trying to make this into a feature, you should, and I can help you do it. And so ultimately he became our executive producer and was really instrumental. He was crucial to getting financing. I don't know if it ever would have been made if not for him. And then he was involved in some ways. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack there, because was Tarantino the only film he did at that time would have been Reservoir Dogs?
Actually,
right?
yeah. When I met him, it was like the first night of the festival, and I'd gotten to know the husband and wife who ran the festival. They were wonderful people, Italians, and they told me about that I had to see Reservoir Dogs, which was a midnight movie that night, and I'd never heard of Quentin Tarantino, even though his film did really well at Sundance that year. I was just not really paying attention to the trades. And so I remember seeing him on the way into the place where we were having dinner and saying, so what are you here for? And he told me the name of his film was showing at midnight. I said, oh, I'm going to go. And I asked him, if it had been at other festivals, I was a complete idiot.
Yeah. No, I mean,
but anyway, so we didn't really talk at dinner, and then I saw the film and I thought I loved it. And then the next day, our film screened with some shorts. He was in the audience. He came up to me afterwards in the lobby, and by that time, I'd just seen his film, and I was like, he was amazing, and I was just overwhelmed that he was that enthusiastic about it and made that offer to us. And it was exactly, I was very naive, and we actually thought it was going to happen, and it did happen, but that's very naive. It was not, if it would not have, maybe we would have met somebody in another festival who felt the same way, but he was the perfect person. And and remarkably, he was writing Pulp Fiction at the time, and he loved Angela Jones' performance in Curdled. She was the main character, obviously, Gabriella. And he told me there over the next few days, we ran into each other and talked a little bit more, that he was going to write a role for her in the film that he was writing at the time, which was Pulp Fiction. So he wrote that cab driver scene for her. And what I thought was really, impressive about his commitment to us was he said, "I'm going to help you do it." There was nothing formal, and he continued to do that over the next 4 years, maybe 3 years, 4 years, because it took 4 years to get from that point to the time the film came out. In spite of all the demands made on him as Pulp Fiction propelled him into the stratosphere, he remained committed. And when we finished the script, Rab and I wrote the feature script together. We contacted him and said we wanted to talk to you. We talked to him in LA. He said, "Yeah, great." He was editing Pulp Fiction at the time, and so we met in this Thai restaurant, and we were planning to ask him if he would executive produce our film. But before we got to that point, it was Reb Braddock, Raoul Puig, who's my dear friend, who's the other producer, was a mile from me now. Before we got to that point, Quentin asked if we would like for him to executive produce the film, and we just pretty much passed out. We couldn't believe it, and because we knew. No, I think that actually was after. No, I take it back. That was while it was in post. But we knew that there was by that point we knew that Quentin's status and influence in film had risen to a point where he really could get us financing. So it was a super exciting moment. Yeah, for sure.
So I want to go back. So you meet with Tarantino in the lobby.
Yeah.
At that time, no cell phones, or if there were, did you have a cell phone at that time? Like, how did you get his number, or like?
No, it was. You're right. It was the way it had been for 70 years before that. He gave me the number of actually Danny DeVito's company, which was his production company for Pulp Fiction, and said, "When you're finished with the script, send it to me and to them." And we did. They passed on it, but then Danny DeVito's company passed on the script when it was done. But then Miramax, which was financing Pulp Fiction, looked at it, and they also passed on financing Curdled in the first instance. But they offered to help us find an agent, which we did, Andrew Canava at UTA, and ultimately through Andrew, we were represented by Daniel Rappaport at 3 Arts, who was our manager, and they were really, along with Quentin, responsible for getting it financing. It went back to Miramax later on after they'd passed, once Billy Baldwin had agreed to be in it, and at that point they thought, well, now they have somebody who's a star. Billy was just in a lot of big budget films at that point, and he wanted to work with Quentin, obviously, and I think he liked the script, and so that's how that all happened. That was, of course, that was a sequence of events in terms of getting from the meeting with Quentin at Via Reggio in the lobby to getting it financed, and that took that whole process to the point where Miramax says we'll finance it was 3 years.
So when you write the script, like at what point, when you guys were touring the short, at what point was the script done? The feature script?
It was not done while we were touring. We had a version, a very, very rough draft. But while we were touring these festivals, 4 or 5 festivals, but we didn't finish it until probably 6 months after that point. So that's a good question. What were we going to do? We were just hoping what happened with Quentin would happen, which was somebody would say, "I really love the short." We'd say, "Yeah, we're in the process of writing the script, the feature version," and they would read it when it was done. And so that was the plan.
How are you? So you just talked about like it was a 3 or 4 year process. How are you making a living during that time? You weren't getting paid to write this, right? To write the script and whatnot.
How was I doing it? I was living in my childhood bedroom in my parents' house, and I was in my early 30s and working part-time as a lawyer for my dad and brother's law firm. So that's how I was doing it. it was, you know, I loved my parents, but it was not the ideal scenario.
A 30-year-old living with the parents is not ideal.
Listen, I think we've all been there. Let's not. There's no judgment.
I have not. I will say right now, I'm the one here that has not.
Okay, so but I guess the only reason I bring that up is because I think there is this idea of, you know, there's this idea of like making a movie, right? And that process that's almost like sensationalized.
Glamorous.
Yeah, glamorous or sensationalized, right? But the reality is like to get it to that point is often incredibly difficult or
stressful.
It's stressful. Yeah. It's sacrificial. You know, you're having to sacrifice your own time for other things because it's a passion project until it's not. You know, type thing. It's the execution of that is usually ends up being incredibly difficult to manage. That's the only reason.
It's true. When you're on your phone with the guy who represents Mike Judge and he's your manager, and you're 2 feet away from your stuffed animals from childhood. Talking about how we're going to present the film to potential financiers. It's a little unnerving, I mean, frustrating, but you know, you always have to keep reminding yourself that it's, you know, it's such a blessing to be at that point. And also, we would go to LA occasionally. Here's the thing about Angela Jones I wanted to say also. She was part of our team. Angela, who is a fantastic person, she's super smart, great actress. She was already in LA, and she was shooting Pulp Fiction. I mean, you know, for a portion of that time, and because Quentin fulfilled that, you know, that notion that she was going to be in Pulp Fiction, and so we would go out and her little apartment in Hollywood was on Franklin was our office, and we'd sit around waiting, you know, make calls to our agent and Andrew Canava and later Daniel Rappaport from her little dinky 1-bedroom apartment.
Well, John, so there's two aspects that, and I don't know if Tarantino says this on when the VHS came out and I watched the afterwards, Tarantino gives a talk about Curdled. I don't know if he said it or if I'm imagining this, so kind of correct me here. One is he took Angela's character, put that in the film. That totally makes sense.
Modified it a little bit, changed her name, modified.
Yeah. Sure. But the essence is there.
Yeah.
But the second thing is the wolf is the cleaner who goes and cleans up crime scenes. Like that had to have been, if he didn't say it, you know, on that, then maybe I'm just imagining it, but that had to have been your guys' character or idea in Pulp Fiction.
I think I'm pretty confident then that it wasn't subliminal, and we never had that conversation. I was thrilled. I mean, I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're responsible for Tarantino's success.
No,
you heard it here right now.
No, actually, no, I'm not. But it was really cool. If that's what happened, that makes me, you know, I'm thrilled about that. There was a line actually in Jackie Brown I was actually more excited about, because when Quentin was here in Miami for the premiere of Curdled, as Slash was here too, which was really amazing.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But, yeah.
So anyway, so we're sitting around. It's the day before the premiere. We're sitting around the pool at the hotel downtown Miami, and Quentin was writing Jackie Brown, which I think is a great film. I think it's like very underrated of his films. And
no, it's rated.
Okay, and so he was in the process of writing it. And we're sitting there, and Jerry Martinez did all the graphics for all of his, at least his first half of his films, like the cigarette brand in Pulp Fiction. It was Apple. I forget what it's called, but anyway, he did all those designs. So he's a cool guy, very talented man. And so we're sitting around, and Quentin's talking about a scene in Jackie Brown where Sam Jackson is on the phone with Pam Grier, and they're planning to meet, and he tells her to meet in a bar. She doesn't know which bar he's referring to. And Quentin said, it's the bar that I'm writing this about is called the Cockatoo Lounge. It's this bar right near the airport. It's still there in LAX. And it's this red brick building, and all the pilots and flight attendants hang out there. And Jerry's listening, and he goes, so he's describing the Cockatoo Lounge. And Jerry's listening, and he goes, "Is that the place with the rooster on the sign?" And Quentin just turns to him and he goes, "It's a cockatoo." And then he goes back to telling the story. And then like he goes on for 20 seconds. And I said, "Wait, Quentin, did you hear what Jerry just said?" He asked if it was the bar with the rooster on the sign. He goes, "Oh my God, I'm putting that in the script." And he put it in the script, and it was in the shooting script for Jackie Brown, and it's not in the movie. But I was very excited that conversation led to it. Anyway, that's that.
So wait, let's jump back. So you guys submit the script. Finally, talk about the word go, like the green light to get this made. Like, where were you? What was that feeling?
Okay.
Was it an oh shit feeling?
No, it was. We were in Los Angeles. We were staying in different places, not Angela's apartment, but we were in LA, and this was the spring of 1995, a long time ago. It all was going to depend on whether Billy Baldwin, at least in the immediate instance, agreed to be in the film. And he was in Miami shooting a film called Fair Game with Cindy Crawford. And Reb and I had met with him a couple times and gotten along really well. And he was kind of toying with the idea of being in it. Bill Russell's daughter was an agent at UTA. I'm sorry, at CAA, not UTA, which was our agency. I think CAA.
Bill Russell, the basketball player,
one of the greatest centers of all time. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And she was friends with Billy Baldwin. So anyway, she brought it up with him, and Billy was more open to it because of her influence. And I'm not sure how that was. Maybe Andrew Canava was friends with her. I can't remember. But anyway, she had something to do with it as well. And so Billy finally agreed. CAA, which was his agency, I believe, was, I think, a little reluctant because it was a little film and we had no experience in feature filmmaking. And so finally, after several weeks of going back and forth, Billy's agents told Andrew Canava and Daniel Rappaport, Daniel was our manager, that Billy was going to do it. And that was about 2.5 months before our first day of shooting, and we only had 6 weeks of pre-production. Wow. So it was about a month before we were going to start official pre-production. That's when you're hiring people and you're on the ground at the location, which was Miami. And so we had very little time because Billy had only a window of a few months to shoot it. He was getting married in August, so we had to shoot in June and July in Miami. And everything went accelerated. So what did it feel like? Getting back to your question, we had gone through several weeks of being very, very hopeful. So it wasn't like something that came out of the blue, but it was a really earth-shattering moment for us to hear that we were going to make the film. And the other thing about it, and this is one of the things I regret about my frame of mind during that period, I was just very nervous that somehow it would either Miramax or Billy would change their mind about it, because I think the truth is that Miramax wanted to make sure that Quentin was happy with, he was their most important filmmaker at the time. Yeah. I think that they on some level they thought it had merit. They thought it was a good idea, but I think they were nervous about it because they didn't want it to be something that would harm his reputation because he was the executive producer of it. So that's where my nervousness at least stemmed from, when the reality was that was not going to happen. And so I think I would have enjoyed the process a little bit more if I hadn't been thinking about that. So, but Quentin, Quentin really believed in it. And as I said, he stayed with us from that first meeting. And ultimately we realized that a lot of the people at Miramax who we worked with all the time liked it. Some of them didn't like it, would have been more comfortable working with people who were more experienced, but it worked out. We made it. And and it was, and Quentin, especially in post-production and promoting the film, was really dedicated to it.
We'll get there. But at this point, by the time he signs on, the script's already done? Like you guys, where are all the rewrites happening? Or did Tarantino look at the script, give any notes or anything?
That's a really good question, because he didn't give us any notes. He read the script and said, I really like this. You guys developed it from short to feature very well. Originally, we had ideas that were much more elaborate. He thought we should write the script as close as possible to the short version, which we did. And Miramax, after they agreed to finance it 6 weeks before, whatever it was, before pre-production was going to begin, they had some of their junior people had ideas for revising the script, and we said we didn't want to. Maybe some of the ideas would have been helpful, I don't know, but we were the filmmakers. So Reb and I, Reb was the director, I was one of the two producers, and we had to make the film. So as writers, we just wouldn't have had time to do that. That was the real concern that we had with that request. Looking back, there's something I would have liked to have done. Years later, I came up with this idea that I think would have made it a more interesting story, because it's pretty focused on it's really a character film. There are events that unfold, but it's really about the main character, this very strange young woman. But there was an idea for basically a third act that would have, I think, been great. I always like films that have a point where you can say, oh, the movie's over, and obviously this is not anything that revolutionary, but this idea, but the movie's over, and then something that you just cannot foresee happening happens, and then you have a whole third act, which is the main character dealing with that issue. And the idea was there would be a family member of the victim who observes her doing this, interacting with the killer, who's really mad at her, and they have an encounter. So at the end, it would have been really even darker than it was. But that was one idea that I had later on. Anyway, so to answer your question, we didn't make any revisions based on what Miramax said.
So okay, so you guys, how long was the shooting schedule, and what are some of the highlights of shooting the movie?
The shooting schedule was 26 days. So it was in 6 day weeks. It was 4 6 day weeks plus 2 additional days. So we shot every day but Sunday. And
are you stressed during all of this, or?
I was stressed somewhat. It was more just, it was adrenaline driven, really, because it was kind of like being in an athletic competition of some kind, because you just couldn't stop. And I was very close to Reb and Raoul, and there were moments when there was friction among those of us who were making the film, but overall a lot of support came from them, and my girlfriend at the time was really helpful in kind of keeping everything focused.
So were there any other projects in between the short film and that 3 years to getting to shooting? Like, had you worked on other things? What I'm really getting to was this really your first film out of film?
Yeah, it was. Well, no, that's not true, because I was the line producer of a low budget film in Sarasota right after graduating for a year.
Okay, so there was some other experience.
Yeah. No, I line produced a film, like a film that was like a $600,000 film or something like that. But but this is something else that I learned. I should have been working on something else of my own, like writing. Although we're writing the script, but at least developing some ideas. There were some things. I had ideas like Fornicator, or other ideas that I filed away, but nothing that I really had prepared to present to anybody. But so that was the story.
So I got a couple questions. One is, what's the actress? She was so big at the time. She was like an MTV VJ or something.
Daisy Fuentes.
Daisy Fuentes. Yeah, she was in it. Like, how do you get people like that to
that was through, I think she was represented by 3 Arts, which was still a major, I believe it's still a major management company. Daniel Rappaport's not there anymore. And as I said, I keep thinking about Mike Judge. This is at the height of Beavis and Butthead. So We were with the same
Yeah.
firm that represented Beavis and Butthead. So so they represented Daisy, and they presented it to her. She wanted to get into film. She was really laid back, really easy to work with. Yeah.
And then at this point, you guys go. You're being paid for this, correct? Like the script and everything. Were you?
Yes, not very much.
Well, sure, but
yeah,
yeah.
we were paid out of the budget of the film. So we were paid as everybody else was being paid.
Got it. And then, so you guys enter. So where I'm going to get to is, at what point does Slash come in to score this?
When we had the final cut of the film done, we post-produced the film in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And so in December, we finished the film. And Miramax Music wanted Slash to possibly score some of their movies, and he was interested. So they showed him different films in post-production, including Curdled. He really liked it, and he said he wanted to create some music for our film. We already had the music selected and done, but this opened up possibilities. He was represented by, he was on Geffen at the time, which was still a big label when being a label mattered more. And they wanted Guns N' Roses to get back together because Guns N' Roses had been on Geffen, and thought that if they did this for Slash, in other words, okay, so Slash said to Miramax, I want to make music for Curdled. Miramax and Slash went to Geffen and said, will you release the soundtrack album for this movie? Geffen said yes, to make Slash happy. They most of our music was, all of our music was selected, but they were putting some money into it in addition to what they're putting into it to finance the recording of Slash's songs. So it enhanced the budget. So we were able to get some songs we wanted, we couldn't afford. So they also, which is unusual, they didn't have many artists on their label who were Latin artists, and that all of our music was Colombian cumbia, Latin rock, Spanish rock. And so they said, you guys can do whatever you want. And they had a couple of bands we really wanted to get on to the album, but the songs just weren't right. Like Weezer had a song called El Scorcho, but it's not really a Latin rock. So
yeah,
that's how the Geffen happened, and it did. I'm really happy with the album, because the album, first of all, Slash was amazing to work with. He was completely genuine, funny, supportive, not very humble about the experience. He met, when this first happened, he met with me and Reb at a little diner on Sunset Boulevard, which was like a really amazing experience. Very open-minded about what Reb wanted for the song. And it was kind of like a flamenco rock song, and he recorded it with Marta Sanchez, this big Spanish performer artist. And then Reb said, I love this song. Can you record an acoustic version of this, which Slash did, and that became a hit on adult contemporary, like the Yanni format. And which was pretty cool. So, and then Slash came down to Miami for the premiere, and so we got to spend a few days with him here, just kicking back, and he performed on stage at Tobacco Road, which is
wow, yeah. So, how was Tarantino during the post process? Was he involved?
Yes, he was, and this is how. So when during development, he was involved, gave us some ideas for casting. As I said, got it financed, gave us encouragement. Then he was shooting From Dusk Till Dawn while we were shooting Curdled, so he didn't come down to Miami for the shoot. We went to LA to post the film, and so he came. Quentin would come to screenings of different cuts, probably 3 or 4 times, and then give us notes, and that's when we spent a lot of time with him. And then and he was great. He was just super supportive. Again, had so many demands on his time, and this was this little tiny film. And the coolest thing was, he called me once after Reb had his final cut and said, I'd love it, but I have some ideas for ways to just kind of trim it down a little bit, maybe make some changes within scenes. I want to sit with you guys for a week in the editing room and do this. So he sat with me and Reb and Mallory Gottlieb, our editor, for an entire week, and he was just kind of closed off to everything else. I remember he'd get a call from his agent and not return it for a couple of days. And I thought, this is crazy. But that's how he was. It was frustrating sometimes when he wasn't working with us, but because it was hard to get through to him. But
Sure.
during this week, he was there the whole time, and he brought his editor, Sally Menke, once to see.
Oh, wow. She is one of the best editors of all time.
She was so kind and supportive, and she's also from Florida. We talked about being from Florida. Made some great suggestions, which meant a lot to us, coming from her, somebody with her experience. And tragically, she died.
She died
about 10 years ago, which was horrible.
And horrible.
And but she was wonderful to us that day. And Quentin also brought Sam Fuller, who was like one of the pioneers of independent filmmaking in the 50s and 60s. And he was, he had a stroke. He was very elderly, and he watched the film. And I remember he couldn't speak very well, but he just turned to us and he said, I like it. She should kill him the second she sees him. Like, instead of having this whole 20-minute sequence where they're interacting. Yeah. So, which I thought that is a great idea, but it's a little.
You can't do that,
it would have been a 70-minute film. But so seeing him and Sally Menke, who was so sweet to us, was just, those were two of the greatest moments of post with Quentin.
Is there any notes that Tarantino gave you that you didn't agree with, and what were they? Let's throw them under the bus.
I can't think of one. I sometimes wonder, it's just looking back, this is much more broad. I already talked about it. Maybe if we had added another element to the film, like, and I hadn't even thought of this idea at the time, like the sister or husband of the victim coming in, but that really had nothing to do with him. We decided together that we were all going to make it very close to the short. So there wasn't anything specific that he said. There was something that Lawrence Bender said that we ignored, which I thought was great advice. We just ignored it because we were idiots. Which was, we ran into him right before our pre-production started. We got in finance. We were in LA. We were at a movie, Reb and I. We see him at the box office. He says, "Congratulations." We said, "Okay, well, if you had one statement of advice for first-time feature filmmakers, what would it be?" And he said, "Get your shots." And so what he meant was the director's shot list. You have to protect it. You have to make sure that even if it means production design will be reduced, maybe you won't be as much time to light. You've got to give him time to get all the shots with enough takes to do the shot justice. And we immediately, like the next day, cut our number of days we were shooting by 2 because we wanted to shoot in Miami and it was going to be more expensive. So we had to cut the days. That we ignored. But anyway, that's great advice, I think.
Wait, real quick question on with in the post-production process of notes with Quentin, was did that feel collaborative, or did you guys feel like equals in that moment, that you could actually like riff on whatever the note was, or was it like it's his note and that's what we're doing?
We didn't feel like equals, at least I didn't. But I remember there were times when Reb especially, I made suggestions creatively, but I was not the creative lead in this. Obviously, it was Reb and Mallory, and there was some back and forth. There was nothing, and I think probably at some point they chose not to go through with the suggestions. But they were all. It was a conversation, really. But I mean, he was pretty, convincing, and they were minor, but they were minor in a way that they collectively made a difference in terms of the pace. And we think we cut out one big piece of a scene, but the rest were like changing the order of shots, even, and reaction shots. There's one thing that he did that I thought was really cool. As an example, he thought the first time we see Billy Baldwin, he's a bartender and he's talking to a woman he eventually murders, Lois Childs, who's wonderful. She was in Bond films and The Great Gatsby. You see them, and from the first shot, it's wide. You see that he's the bartender, but Quentin said, "Why don't you start with a close up on him?" So they're going back and forth, and it looks like they're on a date. And then You
Oh,
reveal that he's her bartender when the waitress calls out to Billy Baldwin, and he goes, "That's cinematic. That's funny." And it was. It was a funny. That was
yeah,
the kind of thing that he added. Yeah.
that's
Fun.
great.
That's cool.
So let's go to premiere night. Where was it? Who all was there? Like, give us the whole feelings, and I'll do your John thing.
No,
here.
just real quick. It was, which is impossible, but Raul Puig, the other producer, is also from here, and he arranged this with Miramax, this elaborate premiere, and it was at a Cocoa Walk Theater in Coconut Grove, which is still there. It has a different name, and so all of our friends and family were there, which was amazing. A lot of the cast and crew were from here, and then Quentin and Billy, Slash, Lois Childs, and then we had a huge party at a place called the Forge that was great, and then we went out and stayed out late at crazy places in South Beach that we had been to before, and we had we all had a really good time, and so it was great. And we got to spend time with them, during the day. Also, as I said, Quentin and Slash, especially, and Slash he was very funny. We ended up at a Cuban diner called La Carreta in Little Havana.
Oh yeah,
and he was talking about the Brady Bunch with my girlfriend at the time, Jenny, and at 5 a.m. over pork chops, and it was.
That's what they were known for, is their pork chops. Hey, did these, like, at this time, it's pretty much the height of Tarantino's popularity. Slash is obviously a big figure. Was it like kind of a mob? Did people come up to you guys and
They did. I mean, it was like a scene at the premiere, but they were mostly going to talk to Quentin and Slash, and the premiere itself. Yeah, but the coolest thing was going to this festival in Spain, outside of Barcelona, a place called Sitges, which was a horror genre festival, and Quentin came to that, and we had a great time there. But then afterwards, we all went down to Madrid, and he introduced us to Pedro Almodovar, which was great. He was also really kind to us. He took us all out to this flamenco club, and that was like I was just I was in awe of him. I've always loved his films, and he was just also very down to earth with us.
When you're at the premiere, you've already seen this a zillion times, right? You've seen this cut. You've worked through this cut so many times. When you're at the premiere, do you have the ability to sort of see it again for the first time, like through eyes of people that have never seen this before, or does it just feel like the same exact thing?
No, definitely, I could see it through their eyes, and that was one of the cool things about seeing it with an audience. We'd seen it, like a cast and crew screening, but people didn't know the movie. Just listening to how they reacted to certain lines was really wonderful. And I remember, like, I was sitting next to Quentin Tarantino, one of the screenings in the Grove, and these kids in front of us. Oh no, this was the premiere. These were people I didn't know sitting in front of us, and they started laughing at this point. And he turned to me, and he was just like, we both knew the line, and it was, this is great, this is awesome. They're getting this twisted humor, and it wasn't, the humor was not just dark, although it's a pretty messed up storyline, but there was a lot of humor related to just the behavior of the people who worked at the company and that kind of thing, and that came across because we were seeing it in the screening.
That's cool.
I'm going to interject myself into this for a second. When Brad and I were touring with Tommy, we went to like 25 screenings. What we would do is you'd introduce the film, come out, and we would listen for the first laugh. We could tell what kind of audience it would be by the first laugh. And then we could, like, all right, we can relax now, let's go. And we'd either just sit and talk or have a drink or something, and then come back, and you always knew. But to your point, Eric, is like, when you first start seeing it with an audience, you don't know how they're going to react, and then it starts to become this kind of like, oh, this is how they're going to react, and then you're kind of waiting for it. So you're seeing it for the first time, but then you're seeing it for the first time with a new audience. Then it's from the first time with this new joke or something in there.
Yeah, and Eric, I love doing that. Other people, Brett didn't like to watch the entire film. I really enjoyed it. Just kind of communicate. You're kind of communicating. You're still communicating with the audience through the story and the characters, and you're seeing it. So in that sense, it's new every time. Yeah, like.
Yeah, to me, it feels like it's validation. I mean, it's the hope for validation and all the work that you put in. That is the feedback, right? When you're when you're sitting there.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a big part of it. The process is great. As we know, the process sometimes is never realized. But yeah, it's great to see the film finish in front of an audience.
So, John, let's wrap up Curdled. Anything that we're forgetting? Any stories that stick out to you or anything?
Yes, there are many, but I no, it's just a fantastic experience, and with people I really cared about and was close to, and exhausting, but I felt very lucky that I got to go through it for sure.
All right. So, one thing I want to bring up that not many people know this about you. Well, I mean, they may not know it's you, but I was teaching and you were teaching when I started teaching at AI or MIU or IFAC or whatever it's called. There was a musician that I didn't know he was a musician at the time, and he put you in his music video. So it is Iron and Wine. Sam Beam was teaching with us. I only knew him as a DP at the time. For a year or whatever, we'd hang out, and with John, you, Goodley, all these people, we'd all hang out. No idea he was a musician until one day he's like, "Hey, will you edit my music video?" He's like, "I don't have much money to do it." So I go in and I'm like, oh, this guy, like, he's a filmmaker. What does he know about music or anything? So I go to the film session. It was what was it? Cineworks? Was that the coloring lab?
Yes, Cineworks.
Yeah. Yeah, so I go in there, and it was the music video "Naked as We Came," and I called up Eric, and I'm like, dude, my friend's a musician. He's unbelievable. And Eric was in New York at the time and on a listening station and heard it.
Yes. And well, it was awesome to see him accomplish that, given the resources that he had. I remember when he was before spring break one year. I asked him what he was doing over the break, and he goes, "I'm going to Seattle. A friend of mine is on Sub Pop, and they're going to listen to my demo." And I go, "Yeah, you're a musician."
Right.
And he hands me a CD that has Iron and Wine written on it in a Sharpie, and I listened to it, and it was basically his first album, and we recorded it on 4-track recorder in his bedroom,
right, that Brandon gave him. That, like, he checked it out for him.
Okay, I didn't realize that, but I remember sometimes when your friends are starting out, I mean, you fear not liking something because you don't know what you're going to say.
Exactly.
And I remember listening to it, and I was like, what the fuck? This is so incredible. And yeah, it was, and he was signed by Sub Pop.
We need to get on a call with Sam to get him back to some of his original stuff.
No, I like the stuff he's doing with Fiona Apple. That last song was awesome. But wait, so John, I forget the album that Naked as We Came, but there was an
Endless
album
Number
like
of Days.
Right, Endless Number of Days. But like The Tree and the Crank or something like that was before. I don't.
Yes.
Yeah, and John, you were
Lion's Mane is
what? Lion's Mane. That's the song you were on. You're in the music video. And what's your role in that music video?
You interpret it in a way that is disappointing to me, in that
it's not disappointing. John, there's no other way of reading it. All right, here, our audience, go watch the video for Lion's Mane and comment what you think John's role is.
I'm curious about what you all have to say, because to me, it's like a very wholesome scene, and through the lens of a world where the unseemly characters who've been there all along have emerged. So we see things differently. But I thought it was a guy trying to be comforting to someone in distress. That's all I thought it was.
See, and I took it as you're the person who put them in that distress.
Yeah, I know.
And all right, one other thing.
But anyway, want that, Sam?
Well, it's funny because when I gave Sam the music video on beta, I edited it in my apartment, gave it to him in beta. He came up with 2 guitars, and I'm like, oh, like, what's going on? He's like, well, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm doing Letterman on Friday, Leno on next Tuesday. I was like, who are you? Like, I knew you as a
I know.
DP, not as a
He was
musician.
still
It was
teaching
crazy.
at the time when he was on Letterman.
He was still teaching. I
I
know.
know.
It's crazy.
And, no, that's really funny. And Eric, I know you know this story, but I have to remind Rick that the music video that he edited for Sam was one shot.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a fade up, fade down. However, they weren't happy with one of the so it's one long tracking shot along a picnic table, and then it comes back and all the food on the picnic table's eaten. They didn't like the transition, so they're like, well, maybe we could do an effect where we stitch in the video and stuff. So we were like contemplating all that, and Sam's just like, why? Let's just put a fade up, fade down, and call it a day. And by the way, easiest editing job I've ever had.
Amazing fade. Incredible.
Incredible fades.
Yeah.
Are we
can't teach that, John?
Are we gonna mention the fact that you never got paid for that?
I wasn't gonna, only because like I don't want to get that call from Sam being like, "Well, here's your $300."
No,
it was $300, and it's better that Sam owes me money so I can take that to the grave.
No. Don't take it to the grave. We're gonna have him on the. We're gonna use it to have him be on the podcast. We're like, you do owe Rick for the edit.
So give us $300 of your time, which will be 2 minutes.
2 minutes, 2 seconds, at best.
I wanted to say something about Eric also. I want to change the subject to Chillingworth, the podcast, because which.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's a successful podcast, which when you're done listening to this, go listen to the true crime podcast Chillingworth, which John is the host of.
And which Rick and Brad Bernstein and my friend Jonathan Payne created together. And, but it was many years after we made Curdled, but creatively it was more fulfilling to me because with a podcast, even though we had a lot of control with Curdled, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you're not there's no one looking who's reviewing everything you do and questioning your financial choices and all that kind of thing, because it's inexpensive to make a podcast. And however, I mean, there were expenses that had to do with recording the interviews that were for the documentary, which we're still hoping to make, but the podcast, it's nowhere near as taxing financially as a movie. So anyway, Eric was there for one of the seminal moments in the creation of the podcast, because we had just uncovered this recording of an interview with one of the Chillingworth is about the murder of a judge in the 50s, and it was this saga that lasted 5 years, and finally recordings of one of the killers, surveillance recordings, led to the solution of the crime. But there was also a recording that the detective made of an interview he did with one of the killers the night the killer was going to be sent to death row, and they were both a little drunk, and they were basically the detective wanted to write a book about the murderer, Floyd Holzapfel, and Eric was able to facilitate getting that recording digitized. And I remember being at your apartment and listening to it for the first time on your turntable, and just it was like we were archaeologists listening to something that was lost. It was really it was lost for 6 years.
It was
Eric,
really.
Did John, because when John likes something or he's blown away by something, he goes, "Holy shit."
Yes. So I remember being this is my take on that experience. So John called me up, which was not a common scenario. John called me, and it was in the evening. It might have even been on the weekend or something. It was in the evening one night, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And you had brought up that you had just received these, and you're like, there's these they look like records, and I'm wondering if we can do something with them, what's on them, if we can try and figure out how to get what's on them. And I was like, sure, bring them over, we'll see. I'm sure we had talked about a million times. I've got a turntable. So you came over, but then these were unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I was like, this is really interesting. I don't know what this is or what machine, because even like the internal spindle had like teeth on it, and I you know, where that would go. I was like, this is from a definitely a specific machine. But we can try, if you'd like to try, you know, if you want to try and just see if we can play what's on it with my turntable. So we ended up having to like actually tape it down because the spindles didn't line up. So we had to line it up and tape it down. And then, and we were like, I don't know if we're going to damage it, so let's start recording. We'll make sure we record anything that we're getting. If we start to think we're damaging it in some way, because again, I don't know what kind of system it was created on, then we'll just stop so we don't, you know, we don't ruin everything. We'll figure something else out. And then we went to go start in on the recording, and it sounded off. And I was like, oh, this is really weird, but we could hear it. So we just kept recording, and because the speed was off, the voices were very high pitched, but then as the recording kept going, the speed was changing, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it got to a point where it got to be normal speech, and then it went to the opposite side and started going very slowly. I was like, oh, this system it's not a constant velocity system like the way that it was recorded. And I don't even remember the name of the system. It was it was kind of like a dictaphone, something along those lines. It was something. I have to go look it back up.
8 years in the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, this vintage system that the way it was set up and designed is how you record it, but you have to play it back on one of those systems in order to hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
The same speed.
Right.
So
yeah,
a couple things that I want to point out, because I think this goes to an important thing, John, that you started with Curdled. We got to Chillingworth and a couple other projects that you and I are doing together. This is never a fast process.
Right.
Like when I saw Curdled, the original, or I'm sorry, Chillingworth, the original trailer.
Yeah.
That had to have been like 2014 or something.
Well,
it
was the year that Tommy was.
So like 2012.
Far Out was released. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've literally, since we had Corner of the Cave and then went to Texas Crew, like we've been developing this, and even to this day, we're still developing it, and technology's changed and there's different things we can do. But it goes to like, you have to have not only passion, but almost an obsession to get some of this stuff done.
No, absolutely.
And I think that's an important lesson.
No, absolutely. And even Curdle, even after Quentin said, I want to help you make this into a feature, we didn't start shooting from that moment. We shot 3 years later, you know, with somebody who was one of the most influential filmmakers at the time. So yeah, it's true.
Right.
It's true, but you also, one of the things that happens when you go through that process is that the resources you have change, in the way you see the story change, the options for telling the story change. So when maybe having that time in the end is for the best, because it turns out to be a better story or a better production, more compelling story, because you see it with more maturity, or you see it from a different direction. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen with Chillingworth. But yeah, it's true. And yeah, you just kind of,
and it's always touch and go. Like sometimes you'll feel like it's going to take off, and then you get set back 5 steps, and then it's like you change directions and it feels like it's going to take off, get set back. And it's one of these things, and we should have David on again to talk about this, is just because it doesn't sell or it's not done now, you could park it for a bit and then come back and sell it at a different time. The market always changes, right? Like if you look at Chillingworth, it's from 1955. So not a lot of people are looking for those old type, old school true crime cases, right?
Yes.
It just so happens that you have, because of your obsession with it, you have so many assets, like an incredible amount of assets, from video to that dictaphone thing you guys are talking about, like to articles, to interviews. I mean, it's insane the amount that you've gathered over
diaries. Yeah. And the interviews with people who are in their 80s, who are no longer alive. Also, that was really, that was crucial to putting us in the position we're in. Yeah, that's all true. That's all absolutely true, and it's exciting. You know, things are revived, and you can go after them again. Yeah.
Just to close that loop, hold on. Just to close that loop on that audio stuff. So we ended up. So yes, I remember John being incredibly excited.
Holy.
Like
It was voices for the first time.
Yeah, John was sitting on the couch, and I remember him just. It was more excited I'd ever seen John. It just like the energy that was there. We ended up being able to take those recordings. There was a company out of New York that that had the algorithm to be able to convert those files.
They knew all.
Oh,
wow! They knew all about
them.
they knew all about this recording device. But Eric, also that was before we were given the surveillance tapes, which were more crucial, because that was that was where the Paul's Apple confesses to the murders. But this was also valuable because it was a candid discussion interview with him about his life, and he was the night before he went to death row. He was interviewed by the detective who brought him in, and they were kind of friends, which was really cool.
Yeah, it was very cool to be there for that experience.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Are you happy with the success of the podcast?
I'm thrilled. I'm really happy.
Yeah, it really took off.
I'm very, very happy.
Have you thought about doing more?
I've thought about it. More. There are other elements to that story that we could tell, but other stories as well. For now, I'm really focused on the documentary and the other projects, the fiction projects, and also I have an idea just kind of for myself, and maybe you'll advise me on it. I want to make a documentary about kind of an impressionistic documentary about the encounters with dolphins that I have, which I've just immersed you in unmercifully.
I love it.
Mercifully.
It is amazing.
Yeah. So and it's like totally out of the blue that this happened. All of a sudden, I realized that there's a pod of dolphins that have been living behind my house for 20 years and 15 years, and now I get to hang out with them almost every day, which is cool. So I have an idea for a novel that I'll tell you about in more detail, but it's basically Flipper meets the Donner Party, and so called King Tide, and basically what happens in the end is there people. It's 10 years in the future, and the world has gone through sea level rise, so it's got a little bit of just a trace of Waterworld, as you would say, and
a trace.
And so there's one group of people, they're running out of food, but the dolphins still hang out with them. And one group of people wants to eat the dolphins, and the other group can't fathom doing that, but they're okay with eating the other group of people. So that's really what I may or may not. It's just an idea.
It sounds sufficiently dark. Yep.
That is true John Maass right there.
Yeah.
John, do you have a defining moment? I know we talked a lot here, but let's wrap it up with a defining moment.
Well, the more colorful one, as I was telling you, was running into Quentin when he came up to me in the lobby. That sent me along a trajectory which I'm really, really happy and grateful for. But before that, in film school, in this process, I pitched an idea for a film after our first year of film school, which was Curdled, and the director of the program, Stuart Kaminsky, who was a renowned mystery writer. He won an Edgar, which is an award for national award for mystery writers. Just a cool guy. And he said, we're not selecting your film for the summer, shorts, 4 or 5 films we're going to make, but I want you to pitch this as a thesis film next year. So basically he was saying, this is good. I'm pre-selecting this. And that's when, and I knew I was going to ask Reb, Reb and I were going to collaborate, and Dave and CLO. And that's when I thought, oh my God, this is actually turning out the way that I had hoped it would. So that, I would say that was more crucial to my experience.
which set the whole trajectory for the other defining moments and everything else.
Yeah.
Too,
Wow.
because
Yeah,
of
the
that
chain reaction.
insight. Yeah,
That's the thing. That's my Goodley moment. Like when Goodley was like, "Don't go home, you jerk."
That right, exactly. Another defining moment, though, not a defining moment, but something I wanted to mention, which is very funny. But the cool thing about being in LA for a little while is you see all these people, who you're in awe of, and sometimes get to even work with them a little bit. But we were in post production in this place called Warner Hollywood, which is near, off of Sunset Boulevard, and we were in an editing suite upstairs, and I was looking out on the parking lot by myself one day, and there was nobody in the parking lot. And Tim Burton was editing Mars Attacks just down the parking lot from us, and he comes walking along by himself. He did not have a cell phone. There really were cell phones then. He's just walking along, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's Tim Burton. He's just coming from the Mars Attacks building. He's walking along, and he starts bursting. He bursts out laughing just because of something he's thinking. And I'm like, oh my God, that's pretty remarkable. I really would like to know what he's thinking right now. We don't do that often. I mean, we might, occasionally laugh at something that occurs to us, but not, like that. So I thought that was very, very cool.
it is.
All right, John, we've wasted enough of your time on a Saturday. Go swim with the dolphins.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. I'm very grateful that you had me, and I'll see you all soon. We'll talk soon.
All right, John.
Thanks, John. It was fun.
All right, John.
Bye-bye. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
It was fun. You've brought up Curdled numerous times when we're hanging out with John. I've never heard him talk about it. You spend a lot more time with John than I do, so I've never heard him talk about it. So it's fun. It's very cool. It was one of his defining moments, right? In his career, in his life.
When Tarantino executive produces your movie, that's a defining moment.
Yeah, it's very cool and fun to hear him talk. I wanted to ask him. I forgot to. It wasn't really space because you don't stop talking. But I wanted to ask him if he had Quentin on his cell phone. Like if you could just like get his phone number and could has the ability to call him up. I don't know.
Number one on speed dial. He doesn't call him, but he just when he picks up his phone, so other people are like, "Is that Tarantino?"
Tarantino. What,
like
Quentin
the Tarantino?
Yeah. Q, is that Q?
Yeah.
The same? Yeah. It was fun. It was great. Is that it? Are we done?